Are we live? Yeah. Oh, it doesn't, okay. Here we are back on the task force on the implementation of the pupil weighting factors report. This is the third section of our meeting. We are about to start our lunchtime public comment period. Each person here offering public comment has 3 minutes. I'm sorry to do that to you, but it's the way we need to do it right now. You are welcome if either you're not able to finish your comments or just if you want to appeal to other types of learners and thinkers to forward any written or even video coverage to Sorsha, who will post it on our website and share it with the committee so we can all follow up on that. And really thank you for being here. You'll have 3 minutes. If you could start your testimony, please, by introducing yourself by your name. And then after you do that, I will start a timer. I will stop you at 3 minutes to make space and to be fair to all the other speakers. And so really thank you for being here and for sharing your thoughts today. The first person up is Sharon McMahon, the superintendent of the Winooski School District. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you, Emily. Sharon McMahon, superintendent of the Winooski School District. And thank you for your time and effort, particularly since June 29th, your first meeting, and in working on what I and many others consider to be the most important equity issue in our state right now. Thanks to the thorough research conducted by UVM and Rutgers, we now know that we have an equitable school funding system that causes harm to students and families who reside in districts with high percentages of students living in poverty and with multilingual or English language learning needs. In the Winooski School District, 62% of our students live in poverty. A third of our students are multilingual learners, and over a quarter of our students qualify for special ed services. As the pupil weighting factors report clearly indicates, the current funding weights are not keeping up with the needs of our students and do not reflect the actual costs we incorporate into our school budget. As a result, Winooski and many other districts do not have the same opportunities as students in wealthier districts. I want to ground us in established law. In 1997, in Brigham versus State of Vermont, the Supreme Court concluded that the state constitution requires the provision of substantially equal educational opportunity to all students. The court declared the state's education funding system unconstitutional because it resulted in wide disparities in per pupil expenditures. They wrote that the right to education is so integral to our constitutional form of government and its guarantees of political and civil rights that any statutory framework that infringes upon the equal enjoyment of that right bears a commensurate heavy burden of justification. Act 59, the enabling legislation of this task force, states in Section 1B, quote, neither the factors considered by the current formula nor the value of the weights reflect contemporary educational circumstances and cost. And values for the existing weights have weak ties, if any, with evidence describing the difference in the cost of educating students with disparate needs. And in Section 1C, the major recommendations of the pupil weighting factors report are straightforward, specifically that the General Assembly increase certain of the existing weights. And in Act 173, Section 11, and the call for a census grant supplemental adjustment in relationship to pupil weighting factors. The implementation of Act 173, which we are in the midst of for FY23, can only happen equitably in conjunction with increased weighting or some other means of supplemental adjustment. In short, the implementation of a block grant and increased funding for factors such as poverty, ELL, and rurality must go hand in hand, or there will be adverse impacts. In Winooski, the ability to meet the complex needs of our students, compounded by the effects of COVID-19, showed us we need more staff. Winooski made the decision to invest federal COVID funds in new teachers such as literacy and math interventionists, social workers, summer programs focused on re-engaging students in literacy support, and 3 new multilingual liaisons. Unfortunately, when this federal funding goes away, the staff will as well. And this wouldn't happen if the legislature corrects the weights.
Thank you very much for sharing. I'm sorry to cut you off. It always feels terribly awkward. Would love to read the rest of your testimony when you get a chance. And I think we're all also available for conversations. Thank you. Next up, we have Sonia Schwartz from the Barre Unified Union School District. If you could start by introducing yourself, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Sonia Spalding, and as you stated, I'm from the Barry Unified Union School District. I'm the chair of the Barry Unified Union School District Board and a constituent of Senator Perchlik's in Washington County. Our board voted this year to join the Coalition for Vermont Student Equity. Thank you for your time and dedication to finding a solution to something we all agree is a serious problem. I have no doubt that you are all working in good faith in an effort to create education funding equity for our children and our struggling communities. Districts such as mine are hurting terribly. You discussed new weights recently from Tammy Colby's memo that made certain policy assumptions. We were hoping to see a simulation from the original report to better understand the impact of those assumptions. But instead, we were told at the last meeting that you wouldn't be recommending weights, period, that your recommendations would only include the cost equity proposal, and that this is in the interest of simplicity and clarity. But I am here to tell you that the majority of Vermont districts that have been harmed by the current inequitable formula do not understand this proposal. It seems to be based on current spending and not on proportionate need. It assumes that it costs the same amount to educate learners in each category, regardless of where they live. And it continues to treat English language learners as a differently funded cohort of learners, which is counterproductive to achieving equity. You've also been warned that this new way of assigning dollar figures to learners will open the door to a statewide voucher program. That is because you are creating easily transferable amounts which can follow a student to the school of their choice. It's the next logical step. I am pleading with you to get back on track and create a plan to implement the report's recommendations. I am also asking you to please allow us to see what an updated simulation of B1 would look like. We want to support your approach, and we can't do that without being allowed to compare your approach to the report's recommendation that we have supported from the beginning. At different events that I have attended, I have heard that the task force was put in place to be able to do the deep dive into pupil weighting recommendation and be prepared to answer the questions that legislators may have when discussing the implementation of pupil weighting during this next session. I believe our legislative representatives will want to know and understand how your current approach of the cost equity proposal will compare to the recommended student weighting proposal. So I don't understand why this important step is being skipped. At our recent annual conference, the Vermont School Boards Association approved a resolution which states, the Vermont School Boards Association fully supports the findings as presented in the pupil weighting factors report dated December 24th, 2019. And furthermore, the Vermont School Boards Association requests that the Vermont legislature to thoughtfully and expeditiously establish an implementation plan for the report's recommendations. I am asking you to please recommend correcting the weights, including for English language learners, and to provide an updated simulation of B1 so that we can see how your policy assumptions actually work in the real world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Sharon Ellenwood. Hello, welcome. If you could introduce yourself for the record.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you. My name is Sharon Ellenwood. I live in Leamington, Vermont, up in the northeast corner of the state along the Connecticut River. And I am a board member of the NEK Choice District. I'm here to testify today for that reason, that I am a member of this new-ish NEK Choice District. We're about 5 years old. We're comprised of 10 towns, 9 of which are in Essex County: Norton, Leamington, Bloomfield, Brunswick, Maidstone, Guildhall, Victory, Granby, East Haven, and one in Caledonia, which is Kirby. The small towns and gords of Essex County are also within us. I'd like to thank the task force for the work you're doing and express the concerns that I have about weighting. We, as you know, are in the poorest, most rural and geographically isolated part of the state and are quite a unique district because we are an all-choice district. The data of poverty and ELL and other information will be crucial to equitable ed taxation. I have grave concerns about some of how the data was collected in some of the simulations I've read, because 30% of our schools are in New Hampshire. So I would like to know how, for instance, the data for the poverty levels for school lunch were collected for our choice students in New Hampshire. Our district sends to approximately 30 schools in the Northeast Kingdom. And the modeling of the poverty level for our district showed as one of the lowest calculated, which seems off to me, that we have the lowest poverty in the model. It would mean approximately 10 kids across the majority of Essex County are living in poverty. So that is the concern that I would like to express. We have one high school in Essex County. We have no pharmacies, we have no hospitals, and we have tiny town infrastructures. I'm asking you to accept the UVM study and the weighting, and to remember our families. To overtax this region of the state would hurt us worse than we already are. We write a check to whatever the school sends us. We do not have a voice as a choice town, for what the tuition will be. So I appreciate you listening. The Northeast Kingdom does not end in Brighton, and it does not end in Newport. It goes all the way to the Connecticut River, and that poses some unique challenges for calculating things. We would like all of our students served, and for you to really consider that uniqueness with data collection, whichever way you go. Please don't lose the data to fully represent the most poor, rural, and most geographically isolated, vulnerable children in the Northeast Kingdom. And again, thanks for your work. A lot of the days are thankless, and I appreciate you listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next up, we have Infinite Co-Pleasure. Welcome, thank you. If you could introduce yourself for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Infinite Co-Pleasure. I'm here today with my community organizer hat on with some questions and some concerns that may have already been addressed by this task force. So my apologies for being a little late to the party. One of them being the involvement of families in thinking about this potential overhaul of the state's pupil weighting or categorical aid formulas. And the other being the ability of the state to provide systems of support and accountability in the face of what might be a dramatic shift in how schools are receiving money from the state. The first concern, while there's plenty of advocacy being done on the behalf of ELL students, students from low-income households, and so on, my question is, beyond surveys, to what extent have families been involved in the advocacy that is happening on their behalf? In my experience, the involvement of families is crucial before the money hits the ground and during the design and implementation phases of the various programs that districts and supervisory unions are putting out. This concern with stopping short at surveys was addressed in a comment made during a small group session I participated in earlier this year. And it went, quote, "I worry about the survey culture," said this concerned parent, "as a way to delay change, use kids' energy up, and things don't get done." Related to that concern is the monitoring and reporting on the allocation of our precious tax dollars. It just seems like now might be a great opportunity to step into that tension between local control and the state's role and responsibility for the overall provision of our public education system, right? As we're all aware, as Secretary French pointed out to us earlier this year, the state is ultimately responsible for the education of its students. The concern about the state's capacity to administer support and accountability was pointed out at a previous task force meeting by Mr. Fannin of the Vermont NEA. And while his point was focused on the state's ability to enforce the Vermont education quality standards, I share similar concerns as it relates to how the state is administering support and accountability for continuous improvement plans, the allocation of Title I dollars, ARP, ESSER funds, and some evidence-based understanding of the impact of additional resources on educational outcomes for students. Since the relationship between money and student learning is not clear-cut and influenced by a wide range of factors across schools, households, and communities, it seems practical for us to begin asking some questions regarding monitoring and reporting on how kids are learning. So when it comes to providing additional services, it's clear that money matters. What isn't clear is how money matters. And I really hope that we can move closer to being more conclusive about how money matters and how families are involved as we rethink schools, how schools are getting additional resources, support, and accountability for those resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for participating in public comment. We appreciate hearing from you. We are going to now take a lunch break and we will be back at 1:15 to continue our conversations. Yes, Representative.
Doesn't need to be on the record or anything, but just so folks know, there is a tour group in the cafeteria right now.